Welcome to another episode of Culinary School Stories, the weekly podcast that is dedicated to sharing the stories of people around the globe whose lives have been influenced, impacted, touched, and or enriched, for good or for bad, from their culinary school experience. Hi, my name is Colin Roach, and I'm your host. Thanks for joining us today. You are an important part of this show, where we ask the question, what's your culinary school story? So now, without any further delay, let's meet today's guest. Welcome to all you listeners out there tuning in today to another episode of the Culinary School Stories podcast, a proud member of the Food Media Network. If you're a first-time listener, we would love to have you subscribe to the show using your favorite podcast app, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, so you'll be alerted when new episodes come out, which is pretty much every Monday. We'd also love it if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can see video highlights of many of our past episodes. So now let's meet today's guest. She was born and raised in Mexico City. However, she chose to go to culinary school in the United States. And with that unique perspective, she can provide advice to other international students who wish to apply to a culinary school in the United States. She also pursued a career outside of the typical norm of working in a restaurant after graduation, which she will share with all of us today. So without further delay, I would now like to introduce to you Chef Rebeca Stevenson. Rebecca, welcome to Culinary School Stories. So glad you are here.
Thank you. It's definitely a pleasure and exciting to be here.
Great. So why don't we just start right out, where was your love of food? Where did that come from? What drove you to culinary school? Tell us a little bit about that.
For sure. So like you mentioned, I was born and raised in Mexico. In fact, I really got to experience visiting a family and they cook something special, and then going to another town and visiting someone else and they had that same dish, but it tasted completely different. So I think my experience through food and travel while being young and in Mexico really, spiked my interest in what are all these flavors and how does that make sense, for a career in the future? So, yes.
Yeah. So then you started, researching culinary schools. Did you think about going in Mexico or other places? And how did it bring you to where you ended up?
For sure. So in high school in Mexico, and it might be like this in other countries, where your last year of high school, you basically decide what you want your career to be. So whether it's sciences, and then your last year is tailored towards sciences, your last year could be tailored towards accounting, towards art. And I knew my last year of high school, I really wanted to study something related to food, so culinary arts. And so I decided to go that route. I think it was something like around accounting. I was like, well, if I want to be a chef, I have to learn how to manage food and money. So I went towards accounting my last year of high school. And when you graduate, you're given options of culinary school. So I originally was going to go to a school in Mexico, very good school. And then I applied, I got accepted, I got a scholarship, I was ready to start. And then I was looking through the admission paperwork, and I saw that the school in Mexico has a partnership with Johnson & Wales. And I was like, well, I'm American. Why don't I just look up Johnson & Wales? I can, that's an option. So, and the funny thing is that I went through all this admission process, let's say the end of the spring, to start college in August, September. So it was a very quick process of okay, well, I have to go see the school and I have to apply. So next thing you know, come August, September, I was admitted into Johnson & Wales relatively quickly to start, that September or whenever the semester started. So it ended up working out, and it was great to see that, Johnson & Wales had a partnership with an international school, and it made the admission process relatively easy. Obviously, I had to get everything translated to Johnson & Wales system. And obviously, a lot of people that are applying to culinary school as an international student might need to, go through that process of translating. And then you also have to take an English aptitude test to apply to a college, like an SAT sort of, to apply to a university in the U.S. But I am thankful that it was a relatively quick process where I could start that coming semester.
Great.
Yeah.
So you applied to Johnson & Wales because of that relationship, but also because you were an American. How did you end up being born and raised in Mexico, but as an American? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that and how that worked.
For sure. So my parents are Christian. They have that religious background, and they decided to become missionaries. So they moved to Mexico when they were younger, and they had my brother and I. So I have dual citizenship. I am Mexican because I was born and raised there, but I'm American because of my parents. And that ended up being useful, wanting to study here in the U.S., having that possibility. Just to have that option to study in the U.S. Yeah.
Great. And when you came to school here at Johnson & Wales in Miami, had you been to the United States already since then? Had you traveled back and forth quite a bit, or was that like your first journey?
Yes. No. So that's a good question. So I originally knew I wanted to study culinary arts. Previous to that, in the summers, I would come to the U.S. and work like at a restaurant and work, from like the beginning of June to like at a bakery or at a restaurant or at a golf course. I would try to work in restaurants when I would have either spring or summer break. So I would come to the U.S. Quite a bit just to try to get some experience in the culinary industry. Well,
that's great. Yeah, so you can come back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was it like when you first got to campus? This is day one. You're moving in. I guess you stayed in the dorms, maybe not. Tell us about that, what you thought, what was going through your head.
For sure. So Johnson & Wales actually has a international international student orientation, and they have a lot of tools for international students when they first get there. So they try to involve you in a club for international students. So that's what happened kind of the first week on campus, was hanging out with other international students, just because they were also, they could offer some perspective on being in the U.S. and studying there, and obviously lived on campus. And later on, I became a resident assistant. But that first semester, I was just living on campus with roommates. But it was definitely like a scary thought of, I came with like one suitcase, didn't really have anything. Like I had to buy like obviously bed sheets and like, it was a little scary, but I think there was an excitement of like the unknown, you know what I mean? Of starting college in a new country. It was fun. Yeah.
Great. So is there anything once you got there, you're like, oh, I should have known this? Is there any advice you could give to someone that's going to college, what they probably should know in advance before they get there and figure it out too late?
Oh, that's a good question. Definitely doing research on where the school is located, really that looks like. So for me, being in Mexico, you walk around everywhere, but the area where this university is not the most walkable, I guess. So for me, it was just, I'm going to walk to the store, and that was the perception I had. So definitely do, make sure you do your research of where the university is located and what resources are available around the university, especially if you're living on campus. As a student, if you're living in the dorms, you're dependent on the cafeteria, or you're dependent on maybe getting your groceries at a grocery store. So definitely it's important to do your research of, what resources are available as a student on campus, if that's where someone's going to live, or even like public transportation. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to know if it's rural or suburban, or if it's in the city. And again, you mentioned transportation. What's around there? So do some of that before you get there and have to go miles to get your bed sheets.
Yes, definitely. I think it was helpful to be involved with the other international students, or to right away find a club that I could, be involved with. And that way I felt a connection with students right away, where they would tell me, oh, you could go here, or I'll take you there. So definitely find connections and groups of people that you feel comfortable with. And that way you have a support system.
Good advice. Good advice.
Yeah.
So now you're on campus, you have to go and take your labs. So that must have been exciting. Now you're going to be pursuing your degree, the career that you're signed up for. What was your first labs? And did you have any favorites or any worst ones? How was the actual lab, the cooking part?
So I enjoyed the labs. I mean, I think I preferred doing the morning labs. I'm a morning person. I knew that I would be energized to be there at whatever it was, 7 a.m. or 6:50 or whatever the time was. And I think it was like soup, stocks, and sauces. Maybe that first class is like, oh, we're going to learn how to make, broth, and we're going to cut stuff. And I mean, I think I expected, this like amazing thing, but definitely a really good class. Like that's a basic class to take. In the beginning. So I am thankful that was, one of my first classes, but it was a funny, and I think it's like the excitement before labs, you're lined up, you have like your fresh press, like, uniform and you're about to go in, like ready for the action. So it was definitely, a good memory of those first labs.
Yeah, you think you're going to be cooking these gourmet plated meals, and you start off with, okay, we're going to peel carrots here for 2 days.
Yeah.
Well, that is the foundation, and I know now it probably comes in handy with what you're doing because you teach some of this now. So why don't you tell the listeners what you're doing and how you teach that to your customers, clients?
Right, for sure. So I am a registered dietitian in the virtual setting and one-on-one counseling, but I also teach culinary nutrition classes. So there's definitely a big component of how to add flavor to things that are, healthy. And typically we think of healthy food to be boring or tasteless. So I do think like those basics definitely influence my job now, where I teach, my clients how to add flavor to foods that would typically be considered boring or not tasty.
Great. So you probably have to teach them how to do some of those cuts, right? Some of those things that maybe you learned in that first class.
Yeah, for sure.
So going back to culinary school, now that you've gone through it and you've had some time to think back, reflect, what advice would you give someone that wanted to pursue a career, go to culinary school, they're contemplating it, and they came to you and they asked, is it a good idea? Is it bad? What would you recommend? Tell us how you may answer them.
I would definitely encourage them, but I would definitely ask them if they've worked in a kitchen or in any kind of setting that they know they want to be in. I do think a lot of, I used to teach, middle and high school culinary classes as well. A lot of kids have a perception of what the industry looks like, and it's not really like that. So I would first ask them, have you tried to work in the industry? Have you been insert yourself some way into the food service industry? And if they enjoy that and if they're okay with that experience, then I would say go ahead and go to culinary school.
Good.
But I do think that there has to be a realistic mindset going into culinary school and what that looks like for their future if they really want that future career.
So when you first went to culinary school, did you think you were going to go into the track that you've gone into now, which is registered dietitian, pursuing that nutritional pursuit? Or did you think you were going to be a restaurateur, open your own restaurant, food truck, something along those lines?
Right. So I think when I first went into culinary school, I obviously considered my Mexican background, and I thought, I'm going to finish culinary school and then I'm going to open up a Mexican restaurant in the U.S. and bring traditional Mexican food. And then I also thought, I could always go back to Mexico and open up my own restaurant. So I always had some kind of desire to open up my own thing with Mexican food. And then I took Professor Brian's class, which was a nutrition course at the North Miami campus. And that kind of planted a seed where I was very interested in whether that was food science or the nutrients that were in foods and how that affected our body. So that planted a little seed of, what is nutrition and what does that look like for a career, and what avenues could I pursue after graduation? So this was probably like after my freshman year, where I really started digging into, what would culinary nutrition look like as a career.
Great. So it ended up changing your trajectory, let's say. So you didn't go right into restaurants and you went and pursued more education, right? You got a second degree?
Yes. So after graduating from Johnson & Wales, I did my culinary internship, worked in a restaurant, and decided, yes, definitely this is not what I want. And that seed of nutrition was there. So I was looking at schools, and I wanted to stay in Florida. So I went to another university to finish a nutrition degree. And then the funny thing is while I was finishing my nutrition bachelor's, I was teaching culinary nutrition classes to kids while I was going to school. So it ended up all tying together some way or another, bringing in that culinary aspect to nutrition while I was going to school. So yes, that was my path right after graduating from Johnson & Wales. So
you went on to, I believe it was Florida International University for your bachelor's degree in nutrition, and then went on and got your master's as well?
Yes. So bachelor's degree at FIU, and then to become a registered dietitian, just to tell the listeners a little bit if this is something that they're interested in.
Okay.
You need to now complete a master's degree. You have to do a medical residency internship, which lasts around 10 to 11 months. And you also have to sit down for a board exam. So that's kind of the pathway for a registered dietitian. So if that's something, if someone's interested in after culinary school, it's definitely another 3 or 4 years.
So based on your current career, do you think culinary school was worth it based on this nutrition path that you went on?
Oh my gosh, yes. I do not regret starting with culinary arts degree. I see so many of my dietitian friends or peers that don't feel comfortable in the kitchen or don't necessarily know how to give their clients advice on cooking. So I definitely think my degree and my background gives me a huge advantage to my nutrition profession. And also, like I mentioned, counseling. I can tell someone to eat broccoli, but if I don't explain to them how to make that broccoli taste good, it really doesn't matter. So it's a component to my profession, increasing my knowledge on that, my individual counseling, and also, teaching the nutrition classes. Having that culinary component definitely, gives an advantage to not only myself, but also the people taking the class. They want to know that information. So definitely worth it.
Sure, I could see how that would be a positive in the career you're in now, being able to, help them. I think Johnson & Wales has that, physician's assistant program, and I know some of the culinary instructors go and help the doctors learn about cooking and food as a possibility, as a remedy, rather than always giving out prescriptions for medicine. Instead, try to do it through food. And just having that comfort in the kitchen with the tools and the skills and working with the various products, I think is a big benefit, big bonus.
Yes, for sure. And especially, typically in culinary school, we're taught, season with salt, and most people think that way. But if you add that nutrition component, and how do you add flavor without salt? That could be a conversation on itself. So definitely having that culinary background in the medical setting is helpful.
So is there specific culinary schools, do you think, now, knowing as a registered dietitian, that are better than others for the route that you're on? So if I wanted to be a registered dietitian and I'm in high school right now and I want to go to a culinary school, is there certain ones, or would any of them suffice?
Right. So Johnson & Wales, I know, has a program. If you did want to become a registered dietitian, there is a culinary arts degree, culinary arts based on nutrition degree that is certified by the Academy of Nutrition. So to become a dietitian, the school needs to be registered under the Academy of Nutrition. And Johnson & Wales does have that program. I think it's in Denver and Rhode Island, but don't quote me here. So you do need to find, yes, you could get a culinary nutrition certificate, but if it's not registered under the Academy of Nutrition, it won't lead to a registered dietitian pathway. So if this is something that someone's interested in, you could get a culinary nutrition degree. Johnson & Wales offers it. I'm not sure what other university does, but it has to be registered under the Academy of Nutrition to be valid towards that registered dietitian pathway.
Great. And you said you had to do an internship or externship. It takes 10 months. Where do you typically do that, and how do you find those properties?
Oh my gosh, this is a whole other crazy process. So it's a matching system. So you apply through a program, and it matches you with a program that you pick. So it's there's only, I think, like a 50% match rate. So you could apply, go through the whole process, but you won't match with an internship site. So it's a very competitive program. And there are different concentrations. So if you wanted to focus on community, you wanted to focus on food service, because there are a lot of dietitians working in the food service industry. Just figured I'd throw that in there. So you could, or clinical, you could pick a pathway for your internship. So you apply through the program, you get matched. And then once you enter this internship program, it could be with a university. So you could get a master's degree and do the internship program at the same time, which is what I did. Or just do the internship. And there are different rotations. So there's 8 weeks of clinical, 6 to 8 weeks of food service, 6 to 8 weeks of community. And you get to pick where these rotations are. So just to give quick examples, the clinical would be in like a hospital setting or outpatient setting. Community could be working for a nonprofit or for WIC. And then food service could be, I did my food service rotation at Nova in Philadelphia, great food service rotation. It could also be either like a cafeteria setting somewhere, or at a restaurant. So the idea is that as a registered dietitian, you get experience in all these areas after you're finished with your degree and before you end up with the registered dietitian title.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great advice.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure there's young females out there listening now that planning on going into this industry or this career, or maybe wanting to become dietitians. Can you speak to, being a female in the industry, what it was like for you in culinary school, what it was like for you when you were out there doing your, working in the industry, working on the line as you did, or as you went on to pursue your other educational pursuits?
Right. So definitely in the kitchen I would start off with culinary school. Let's start with that.
Okay.
You can cut off that part. So starting with culinary school, you could definitely see that the ratio of male to female is higher. There's more males, obviously, in your classes than females. And there's more male professors, at least at the campus that I went to. So right off the start, you can see the ratio is a bit different. And then also through culinary school, when I would volunteer for events, most of the I would say the head chefs or the people that I was volunteering under were male. So from the beginning, going in as a female, you have this perception of like, okay, there's only a few of us. And then also finding, someone that you could relate to. So I tried to look for Hispanic female chefs, and I would look them up. And that's something that from the beginning in culinary school, I tried to find women in the culinary industry that I could look up to. So that's definitely something that I would say to a female going into culinary school. Don't feel intimidated if you feel that there's more men than women, but definitely find someone that you could look up to and that you could ask questions to. So if there's a female professor, I had Professor Machado at the North Miami campus, where she was very open to answering questions and she would tell you about her experiences. So definitely from the start, try to find that mentor or someone that you could ask questions to that could encourage you through this career. And then also after culinary school, going into the restaurant industry, you still see that ratio of there's obviously less women than men. And it's, again, just trying to find, if you see that other women in the kitchen, asking her questions, seeing how she got to where she is now, and finding your own path. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're male or female, but if you know that you're passionate, you're interested in a specific thing, whether it's nutrition or working in a kitchen, if you're passionate about what you do and you really put in the effort towards that path, it doesn't matter if you're female, male, like you're going to get there. So I would definitely say that to my female peers or someone wanting to enter this industry. So
that lack of role models may be depending on which campus or which school or which university that you go to, but do you see it to be the same or that to be true in the registered dietitian or in baking or other areas? Did you notice if the ratio was the same or if it was different?
Well, I honestly find then that it's a reverse kind of situation as a registered dietitian going into the nutrition field. There's a lot more female registered dietitians and not that very many male registered dietitians. So,
why do you think that is?
I think the only male dietitians that I've seen, at least in school, they were the ones that wanted to pursue, let's say, sports nutrition,
okay,
or even food service. So in the clinical setting, even in the food service industry, most of the managers or coordinators are male, but then all the registered dietitians under them are female. So it's an interesting setup of how in positions of authority or management, you typically see men. In the food service industry as dietitians, or in sports nutrition, you see men. So I think maybe there's this perception of, men only fit into these roles and women fit into these roles. But I think, now compared to maybe when I went to culinary school, there's a lot more variety and like, what's the word?
Maybe diversity of different.
Yeah, there's more diversity in the field, so you see more of an even playing field in the nutrition and culinary industries.
And maybe that's true. It kind of mirrors the medical field. 100 years ago, doctors were male and nurses were female, but now it's, you have female doctors, you have male nurses, so it's getting kind of more mixed. And that's probably true with culinary school now as it goes. It's, it's balancing out a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, you talked about events that you did at school. You just mentioned that. Mm-hmm. Could you talk about extracurricular activities when you're in school and how important or valuable they were to you?
Yes, for sure. So if you're someone, in culinary school or you're thinking of going, I would encourage anyone to search for either it's volunteer opportunities through an organization. So I was part of I think what was called like the special functions team, where they would open up volunteer opportunities through the university for events. And then I was part of the ACF student chapter. So through these two organizations, I was able to volunteer and meet other people in the industry. And I think that was valuable for my learning experience, but also for my networking. So now, that I graduated and I kind of have my own business, like definitely going back to those resources, or you see these people again in your career where you're just like, oh, I met you 5 years ago and we did this event together. So definitely putting yourself out there as a volunteer and through the community, through an organization, will definitely open the doors to new experiences, meeting people, and networking for your future career. So I definitely encourage that to anyone because it was a valuable experience for me during my culinary arts degree.
And you mentioned ACF, which is, of course, stands for the American Culinary Federation.
Yes.
You were a student member of that. Did you end up doing any events with them or getting certified through them?
Yes. So they would have events. As a student, I participated in events, whether that they would organize, a monthly competition, and then other students would join. So those kind of small in-house competitions. But I also attended the Knowledge Bowl, which is a student-based competition, and they hold it in different parts of the country. I'm not sure with COVID if they're going to be doing that, but it's basically almost like a Jeopardy, but culinary questions, basically.
Uh-huh.
And it was very fun. So that was a big event that I was able to participate in through the ACS. And a great thing about this event is that you're basically flying. We flew to like North Carolina or South Carolina. I don't remember, one of the Carolinas. And all of this is through the university. So you go out there and you get to meet all these different chefs from ACF, that organization, and seeing what they're doing. So there's like a meat cutting workshop, and then next thing you know, there's like a wine tasting, and that was just an amazing event to be part of. And you as a student, you get to be exposed to all these different careers and pathways and what people are doing and trends in the industry. So definitely joining ACF was a great extracurricular activity to do. And then I did become certified through them as their most basic certification you can achieve when you go to culinary school. So if that's it's a relatively easy thing for certification to get, if that's something someone wants to do as a student or graduating from culinary school.
And that's the CC, Certified Culinarian?
Yes, obviously I'm not that familiar with it now, but there are obviously more certifications that require more intense preparation. And actually, now that I remember, as part of the ACF student chapter, we would host these exams for the people that wanted to get those certifications. So it was like
practical exams for the certification.
Yeah, practical exam. Yeah, they would host those at the Johnson & Wales North Miami campus, and we were the students that would help either set up the kitchen for them. So that was also a great thing to volunteer and be a part of.
So these volunteer events and these certifications, these professional organizations not only help you professionally, but I'm assuming they would help personally too. It's a great way to meet people. Like you mentioned that you were belong to the French club too. Maybe you could tell us about those that aren't professional, but maybe something right there on campus that someone could get involved in just to break out of the shell, break the ice, and get to meet people.
Yes, that was definitely a very fun club. The professor started it. Perdue, he was a professor at the time at the North Miami campus. He was French himself, and very passionate about his culture and all the products that came from France. So we would have I think it was like bi-weekly meeting where we would go over like French terminology in the culinary industry, differences in French wines, French cheese. It was a very good club to be part of because it's very different than maybe my own interest of, Hispanic heritage and like other technical things that you wouldn't learn in class. Being part of a club introduces you to a different topic, and you also get to meet other people. So they would have maybe like speakers, or the professor himself will share his experiences. So it's experiences and meeting people that you wouldn't have met otherwise. Like if you just go to your labs and you go to your classes, yes, that's great, but there has to be an effort of knowing more about the industry and more about, a culinary aspect that you wouldn't have thought of. And that's what I think the French club did for me, and maybe other people that were part of the club as well, is just exposing us to more information and different food that you wouldn't have otherwise tasted or tried.
That's wonderful. I mean, it's not just theoretical. You got to taste wines and taste cheeses, and wow, that sounds great.
Who's going to complain about that, right? And in any event, I would encourage anyone, like this group, this club, the French club, started from students saying that they wanted to learn more. So if even you're in culinary school now and you want to learn more of a topic, like a lot of professors are open to, starting something if the interest is there. So I would encourage you, if you have an interest in a specific topic or culture, speak to your professors. Like there's always a pathway or a way to learn more about something that you're interested in.
Yeah, that's a great point, because as a professor myself, we can start clubs and some, the interest is there and then they kind of fall off, and that's fine too. But if you are a culinary student or any student in a college or university, you want to start a club, there's usually, financial resources and monies and things available to do that. And if you have an interest, start it. There's probably others out there that have the same interest, and, what a way to learn outside of the classroom.
Yes, for sure. And even, there could be clubs for certain like skill sets. Like I remember, if we wanted to learn a specific skill set for meat cutting that we didn't get enough time to do in class, the professor would be happy to hold a workshop for it. So I think as a student, you have to be almost in charge of your own education. Like you have to be assertive and say, oh, I want to learn this. Can you help me, professor? Can we start something? And like you mentioned, the school will always offer resources, but there has to be an interest and an initiative from the student standpoint.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. They have to be in charge of their own education and, ask for those things. Mm-hmm. I know years ago I did a food media club because people know that I have a YouTube channel and I have multiple podcasts, this one included, and I do a lot with media. So some students were interested in maybe starting their own shows. So we did that for a few years, but then, a new wave of students come in and they may be interested in something else, and it kind of fell off. But, if you're interested, and while you're going through those 2 years or 4 years, speak up and definitely get those started and take the initiative.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so now you transition to what you're doing now out there in the industry. One of the things you do is you teach, nutrition classes, and because of the pandemic and COVID, you're doing it virtually. Kind of tell us about that, or take us through it, because it's hard to imagine, so we can wrap our minds around. How do you teach a nutrition culinary class virtually?
Yes. So I'll start off, in definitely in person, there's a lot more that goes into the class, right? So you have an audience, they're actually looking at you, you can interact, you can answer questions a lot easier, or, in a more effective way, and you can provide feedback in a more effective way in the class. But when you transition to a virtual setting, it's only what you see in that little camera. So that's the tricky part. And I think the culinary nutrition class itself, from my standpoint, the setup is a lot more efficient because I'm in the comfort of my own home. I get to set up things in my own kitchen, and I don't have to, travel anywhere. Yeah. But it was also a learning curve because it's setting up, the camera, as you may know, in a specific angle and getting the lighting right and making sure everyone can hear me. So that was definitely a learning curve in the beginning, is that media setup. Where as a student, they would be able to see everything that I'm doing and can hear everything I'm saying without the internet cutting out. So that was definitely a learning curve in the beginning. But once that setup was done and I felt comfortable with that, then it could really go into, okay, teaching the class almost like I would in person, but then it's also checking in with everyone on camera. So if people are following along with the class in, let's say, a Zoom setting, you could see the little squares of everyone cooking along.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also encouraging everyone that if they don't ask questions, I really can't really see what they're doing.
Yeah.
Part of a virtual class as well is, yes, you're cooking, you're talking, you're teaching, but also encouraging the students to ask questions and to be in charge again of their own experience and their own education by asking questions or showing you what they're making. And then from a nutrition standpoint, it's always good because you can actually see into people's pantries and see what they have at home.
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons, I guess, to in-person and virtual, but so far I'm really enjoying the change to a virtual setting. It was just a learning curve in the beginning.
Sure. For all of us teaching this remotely and even doing this interview, podcasting, instead of being in person, now we're doing it through Zoom. So, technology has helped, and it's also kind of a burden, hinders. So thinking about those things, thinking about what you've experienced from the past to what you're doing now, what do you think is the future of culinary school, culinary classes, training going forward? Hopefully we'll be past this someday, this pandemic. What are the good parts that we may take with us? Is there going to be changes? Are we going to go back to the old way?
Oh, that's a good question. I do think that this virtual setting and moving things to a virtual platform has definitely helped. And I think it's going to stay there. I don't think things are going to go back exactly to what they were before. I think this definitely opened a pathway that maybe a lot of us didn't know existed. We all saw culinary shows on TV, but there wasn't a sense of, consistent culinary classes online or, teaching online. A lot of us maybe didn't think it was accessible as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe because we weren't forced to be in this setting. But I think there's so many more resources now that being in the virtual world has allowed us to have, that transitioning back to where we were before, we'd be missing out on a couple things, I think. So I think as we move past COVID, there's going to be still a lot of demand for virtual, whether that's services, whether nutrition or culinary services. I think that demand is still going to be there.
Yeah, I think it's going to open up a whole new audience. People can't travel, they can't go to those brick and mortar places as often. So, you could do this in this virtual reality. I could see, hopefully, maybe like a hologram. We could project us right into someone's kitchen.
Oh, that would be cool.
They could watch us cooking with them. So hopefully it keeps growing from there.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think, let's say people that can't leave their house, but whether they have a illness or maybe they're an at-risk population that they can't leave their house. This virtual setup, once they learn it, it has more of an advantage, I think, than it has negative effects.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the trends that you've seen maybe in the industry or now in your industry? I know in the typical kitchen in the past, there's always been, maybe substance abuse, mental health. Do you see that in your part of the industry where you're taking care of people, or is it more on the nutrition, their health, their body, what they're eating?
Right. I mean, I think with the nutrition world and in the nutrition industry, there's a trend more, at least in nutrition from a dietitian's perspective. We used to be a lot of okay, this has a certain amount of calories and you need to run 3 miles to burn these amount of calories. I think we're transitioning to calorie burning now towards intuitive eating and more behavior-based counseling. And I really like that transition of just how we counsel individuals. It's not necessarily either fearing foods or teaching people or discouraging people about eating foods that they enjoy. I think we're moving towards more of a intuitive eating, mindful eating, health at every body size. So I think that's the trend in the nutrition industry is understanding, behavior with eating and food and cooking and actually enjoying foods or enjoying cooking foods, whether I think it used to be, very much, I'm not sure how to say, but more of a restriction mindset and portion sizes and being a certain size. And I think now we're opening up to the idea of, you can be healthy at every size, you can enjoy food. So that's exciting.
And instead of restricting what they eat, you could eat anything. You just got to eat it in moderation and maybe make some changes to it rather than saying, no, you cannot have ice cream or cake, right?
For sure. And I think that opens up a great opportunity for me in like culinary classes is that, people used to think, oh, I have to eat this plain chicken and broccoli, like typical, we see in the fitness industry. That's what you had to eat to lose weight. And I think now we're transitioning into more like flavor-based healthy eating where no, you can actually cook dishes that taste good and you could still lose weight or you can increase your performance. And it's good to see that transition of mindset from, one place to another.
Awesome. Good advice. So where do you work now, or how can someone get more info, or if they wanted to contact you, or do you have a social media presence, or do you have websites where your employer is, something you want to speak to?
Yes, for sure. So the best way to reach out to me is on Instagram at the Culinary Jalapeno. That's where I post a lot of cooking and nutrition tips. And through there, if someone's interested in culinary nutrition classes, that's where I host a free monthly class just for the community. So if that's something you're interested in joining or being a part of, that would be a way to register through my Instagram account. If someone is local to the South Florida area, I do work at a wellness center called ADAPT, but that is a brick and mortar location that I work at. And I also provide, like I mentioned, the virtual counseling or the virtual cooking classes. So Instagram at the Culinary Jalapeno, or if you're local to South Florida, my office is here at ADAPT, a wellness center.
And that's ADAPT, ADAPT?
Yes.
And the Culinary Jalapeno, you're going to offer those monthly classes. Tell us about what one might be and how does someone participate? Do they buy the food and then cut and chop and cook along with you, or do you just do a demo and they watch? Do you give them recipes?
So the purpose of the class is to introduce healthy cooking to everyone's home, and also that could be with your significant other or with your family, get everyone involved in the kitchen. So the idea is that it's a live interactive class. So everyone buys the ingredients on their own and they tune in. The next class is actually this Wednesday at 7 p.m. We're making a vegetable pad thai with a pineapple cocktail. This is the adult version, right? So everyone, once you register, you get the ingredient list. You buy the ingredients on your own and you tune in this case at 7 p.m. and we cook together.
Great. How many people usually tune in? Do you have a wide audience? Is it more intimate and more smaller?
So I would say it's typically 8 to 10 people for these free live classes. But then if someone is interested to having a class for their own facility or business, then that's an option that I offer as well. Oh,
good. So you could do like a team-based building or something along that for a company, and you can do a private group through that.
For sure. And then also what I do here at ADAPT, they have a youth athletic programs. So a lot of the classes I teach are for kids as well. So introducing them to nutrition and cooking, depending on their age group. So if that's something,
I looked at the website. It looks like a fantastic facility inside there. So where would someone go to that? Is that adapt.com? What was their website?
Yes. So that is, I'll tell you right now, I'm looking it up. Trainadapt.com.
Trainadapt.com.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can put that in the show notes if someone's local in the North Miami area and wants to check that out, or comes down to South Florida for a vacation. Maybe that's something that would be interesting to you.
For sure.
So you're obviously an influence to your clients and to your students and to your audience. I mean, in a positive way, trying to help them and be better in their life and in their nutrition and their eating. So let's look at you specifically. Who are 3 people who have been the most influential to you? It could be for you personal, could be professional, could be, someone that was one of your instructors, teachers, maybe 3 people that were most influential to you.
Oh, this is a good question. I might need a minute.
Sure.
I will say definitely my parents have been instrumental to me pursuing the career that I have. They've been very supportive. I feel if I were to tell them, I want to open up a business somewhere or move to, Singapore and start cooking there, they'd be supportive of anything I do. As crazy as the idea might be, they would be supportive. So I think, they've been a big influence because they chose an unconventional career as being missionaries and traveling. That kind of encouraged me to look outside the box and try to find an unconventional career pathway. I think they're definitely someone, just their ideals and how they live their life is something that I look up to. I think the second person, I will say, Chef Brian, again, he's a person that planted the seed for me for nutrition. And I think also his personality in class, it was very, very much inquisitive. Food is fun, and like, this is an exciting class to be like. His just attitude in class and about life was very encouraging as a student, and also just a perspective on food. I think, in culinary school, you try to not mess up and not to make any mistakes, but being in his class and learn and seeing his perspective on food definitely opened up, a sense of, oh, food can be fun and you can be creative, and learning can be fun when it comes to nutrition and what's in food. So I would say in my culinary degree, he was definitely someone that was influential. And then I have to think of my third person.
I could jump in there on Chef Brian. Having worked with him for years, I have to agree with all of that. He was so full of life. Yeah. He always had that smile and the humor in the classroom. Didn't take it too serious, but was so knowledgeable. And it was a big loss when he recently passed away, and it was a loss to the community and to the school and to academics and his past students.
Yes, definitely. It was a great loss, and I think even more, it cherished the memories even more, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your third one?
Oh gosh, this third one is hard. I don't want to say one chef, but like I mentioned, like in culinary school and even in nutrition and FIU, I was always would look up, female chefs that are registered dietitians doing things out there, and I think. Not one in particular, but I think just knowing that there's women out there doing what I want to do was definitely encouraging. It was almost like, well, they can do it. I could do it too. They have an unconventional pathway doing this. I can do it as well. So I think it was just, I can't pinpoint one, but I want to say.
It doesn't have to be a specific individual. It could be a collaborative, a group of people that, the female registered dietitians that came through the chef ranks.
Definitely. I can't pinpoint one, but I think it was just seeing another group of women out there doing what I wanted to do was definitely. Oh, well, I do have one person that I can think of that was, I want to say instrumental, but I did, and you can cut out whatever you want for my food.
Okay.
But, so I did my internship at a resort in Germany, and they had a Michelin-starred restaurant in this resort. And there was one woman in that whole kitchen, and she was like the most like badass, like, sorry if I can't say that word here, but like
That's right.
the most amazing woman I've ever seen. And just talking to her, it was almost just like, well, this is what I love to do, and I know I'm good at it, and I'm going to do it regardless of what anyone in this kitchen says. So I think like that attitude and leaving there with kind of how she thought about things and her like meticulous like process about food or thinking about flavors, just was very inspiring to me. And there was a huge language barrier. She barely spoke English. I didn't speak German, but just seeing how efficiently she worked, regardless of what other people in the kitchen said to her, or if she messed up, like it was just a sense of like, I know what I'm doing, and I know it's good, and I know what my thought process is going to work. And that's almost what I've thought of, like, going to nutrition school. Like, okay, I know that I love this and I'm going to be good at it. I just need to finish. I know that I want to teach cooking classes. I just need to start, and people will come. So I think her kind of mentality on being passionate about what you do has transcended into, okay, my career and being positive in the career choices that I've made.
Great. Very good.
Yeah.
So culinary school is expensive, right? It's because it's, you have to deal with a lot of food products. You can't put, 100, 200 students in a lecture hall. It's, it's 15 in a class. It's really small. So, there's a lot of more expenses. So it is expensive tuition wise. It's also, it can be hard. It's challenging. It takes time like anything. So was it worth it for you, thinking back, all the things and the challenges and pros and cons? And what comes down to it, was the return on investment there? Was it worth it? Was it something you would change? Would you not do it again?
Yes, it was definitely worth it. I think I got the most out of that experience. Like I said, I was involved in so many things, met so many people, learned basic skills. It was definitely worth it.
Good.
And I also think, the financial burden, you brought it up, like there's ways around that. Like I got scholarships. I became a resident assistant, so I didn't have to pay to live in the dorms. Like that's part of the package of being a resident assistant. So if this is, as a prospective student, like if this is something you're really passionate about, there are scholarships. I looked up into any like scholarship that was out there. So if you really want this, you can make it happen.
That's a good point. Helping way to cut that financial burden a little bit, take off some of that off the plate.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So what's next for you? What's next for Chef Rebeca Stevenson? What's the future look like?
Yes. So I'll still keep teaching culinary nutrition classes in the virtual setting. I ideally want to create a culinary nutrition course virtually. So anyone that wants to learn how to cook in a healthy way at home, they can get access to this course. So that will be definitely something, if anyone out there is interested in this, to keep an eye out for that.
Great. And what about long term?
Oh, long term. Ooh, like 5-10 years? What are we like?
Yeah, sure. You must have dreams. You must have goals.
Oh, I played around with the idea of getting a doctorate in nutrition, but that's just, you can speak more to that.
It's a long mountain to climb.
But Dr. Stevenson sounds kind of cool. Another letter is to add to the name. So that would be a fun next challenge, because I do enjoy the education and academic side of the career. So I don't know, and then maybe teach at if Johnson Wales is hiring for a culinary nutrition professor.
Sure.
Why not? And yes, definitely growing my virtual coaching business. That's definitely something that's one of my goals for the future as well.
Well, I'm a big proponent of lifelong learning. So and I always say, go on and get degrees and, go on and get schooling, go on and get training, take courses, take webinars, anything so you can keep growing as a human and getting a PhD or any of those, terminal degrees is, yes, it's challenging and it does take time, but you look at it in small chunks, and if it's something you're passionate about, you enjoy it. So it's like, it's fun, those 6 years to 10 years to get that and writing the dissertation. If it's a topic that you love, I would encourage anybody to go and pursue that. And even if you don't finish, those classes that you take, courses as part of that degree program, are still valuable on their own. So start somewhere, take a class, take 2 classes, and before you know it, you may be at the finish line and have that that degree.
For sure. What was your PhD dissertation in? I'm just curious. You don't have to add this into the show.
That's okay. My PhD was in higher education, administration, and methodology. So, and I did my dissertation on Canadian professional chefs' perception of culinary degrees.
Oh, interesting.
So I had to use Canadian because the American Culinary Federation, which I've been a member of for 20 years, would not give me access to the chefs to ask them to do my survey. So I went to Canada. That's a little sore spot. But they didn't see the value in it. But Canada was like, yeah, why are you coming to us as an American? I go, well, I can't get it from them. They gave me access to all of their chefs' emails, and I sent them the information, and it's published. It's out there if anyone wants to read, and I can give you the short version of it or the bottom line. Chefs out there in the industry do value culinary education degrees, and the research shows that they actually pay more. You earn more money with a culinary degree than you do if you didn't have that degree, at least in Canada.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So maybe someone would like to replicate that study here in this country or in Germany or Australia or another place and see if it's true in their areas. And even today, because it's, the data is old now.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's still valid, definitely. That's very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to speak to that I may not have hit on here? I'm reading your questionnaire here, or maybe something that just came up in our conversations that you would like to share with the listeners?
I will say, I just want to encourage anyone out there, not to let, if a culinary degree is something you really want to look for, or registered dietitian title, there's ways to get to that end goal. I think for me, that was a major thing of, okay, I need to go to the US to culinary school. What are the steps that I need to do to get there? I want to change my degree. Okay, what are the steps I need to do to get there? I don't think I ever had like doubts or a mentality of I can't do it. It was, I'm okay, well, one step at a time. What is the sequence of things that I need to do to get to this point where I want to be? So I just want to encourage anyone, don't be discouraged. Just think of the small steps that you need to take to get to wherever you want to be, whether that's, be a head chef somewhere, you want to teach virtual classes, just finish a degree. It's very easy to become overwhelmed and discouraged, but I want to encourage everyone, just take that first step to whatever your goal is, and it's going to happen. It just might take a little bit longer, or, you need to find resources to help you, but it just a message of encouragement to anyone that has doubts, to just take that first step and you'll get there.
Yeah, and all the information you need and even the help is out there. You just have to go out and ask and seek and do the research on it and find out what that information is. And, today more than ever. And I think with this pandemic and the COVID, this is a real entrepreneurial time. I think there's going to be, changes and shifts in the market now. And it's not the status quo, the way we used to always do stuff. And those that can, pivot and make those changes, I think are going to be very successful. And so think outside the box. And I think that could be very helpful.
Yes, definitely. And I think, if you have an idea, start that idea. Who knows? It might be successful. It might not, but you won't know until you try something. So I definitely agree. This is a time to, if you have an idea, if you have that entrepreneurial spirit, this is a great time to start.
And I read a book recently, and the title was called Start Ugly. It said, if you keep waiting for the perfect time, it's never going to happen. So just go out there and do it. And it's going to be ugly and you're going to make mistakes, but it's okay because, you're going to get better through time. And a year, 2 years, whatever, looking back, you're at that point instead of still waiting to start.
Yes, definitely. I agree. And that's something for anyone, no matter what your age is, where you're at in your career. That's definitely something that applies to everyone. Yeah.
What's one common myth about the profession or culinary school or industry that you want to debunk?
Ooh, this is a good question. I would say a myth is that I think you go to culinary school to end up working at a restaurant. I think that's a big myth. You could go to culinary school and end up, in food service accounting. I think there's a streamlined idea that you have to go to culinary school to be a chef in a restaurant. And the truth is that you can go to culinary school to become whatever you want after, in whatever industry you want after culinary school. So one way or another, that culinary background is going to help you or give you an advantage in whatever career pathway you choose after. Whether that's nutrition or accounting or food service, or working in a hospital, that background is always going to serve you wherever you go.
Yeah, there's so many outlets that career you can take in different areas. So you're not, pigeonholed or stuck into one specific career path.
Yes, definitely.
What would you tell yourself before starting culinary school?
What would I tell myself before starting culinary school? I would definitely, and this is something I did, is to be more open-minded and more extroverted. I think when I first started culinary school, I was very shy and maybe didn't want to talk to people. But as soon as maybe I joined a club and I started interacting with more people, I was open to a whole new set of experiences. So I wish I would have done that sooner. I wouldn't just shied away to my own self and just go to classes and come back to my dorm, go to class, come back to my dorm. I wish I would have started to become more social and become involved in clubs a lot sooner, because I think I would have gained even more experiences. So I think that's something I would tell myself, to not be so shy and meet people.
And that's so true. I hear that from a lot of students after, when they reflect, and it's probably true with myself when I was in culinary school. And it's really, if anyone is out there listening, get out of the box, get out of your comfort zone. Yes, it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, but if you're comfortable, you're not learning. So it's good to be uncomfortable. Put yourself in those positions, and it's going to open up other doors for you. And later on, you'll look back and you'll be so glad that you did.
Yes, definitely.
So what do you think people that are looking to apply to culinary school should know before they apply? So someone that's getting into it, maybe from an international student's perspective, what should they know?
Right. So I would definitely, as an international student, look at the requirements of the culinary school you want to attend. Obviously, before going through the process, a lot of universities require an English aptitude test, or they require an SAT version for international students. So do all your research of what you need before you start applying. That way you're prepared going into the application process, what that looks like. Not to discourage anyone, but it's just a longer process than if you were just, directly applying. And also reach out to, a lot of schools have an international admissions office. So talk to them directly on the phone, really try to get to know that office because they're the ones that are going to be processing all your documents. So really get to know that office as an international student. And also it's important to know the area where the universities are. So I knew Johnson & Wales and North Miami. I knew there were it was internationally, there were a lot of international students there, and there's being Hispanic, I wanted to be surrounded with Spanish speaking people that were Hispanic. So I would definitely recommend do your research of what's around that culinary school, and if it's tailored towards international students. So if I would have moved, to the middle of like Ohio, nothing against Ohio, but like
right.
Maybe there weren't any international students or Hispanic students there that I could relate to. So if that's something you want out of a university, definitely do the research ahead of time. See if they have an international students club or activities for international students. And Johnson Wales even had an orientation specific for international students.
Wow.
So I think that's what really drew me to the university, knowing that I had a place and there were other students like me. So definitely do your research. And then if you're living on campus, I didn't really do my research of what that would look like just because that's not a thing in Mexico. Like people don't live on campuses in college. That's something I saw in the movies and then reality check when I got here. So definitely like, is it walkable? Like, is there a grocery store? Like, can you, walk around campus? So I know different colleges and universities are more tailored towards, students living on campus. So definitely look into that before you decide to apply, especially if you're going to be living in the dorm.
Right. If it's a residential campus or is it a commuter campus, you want to know those things. And it's really hard going to college by itself, just that change and moving in and away from home, but to be an international student and do that, going to a new country on top of it, is really going to be, some major changes. So your advice is really on point, that contact the people that are experts in that on that campus.
Yes, for sure. And they might, and even if they don't have resources, you just asking those questions forces them to think, oh, well, maybe we should open up more resources for these students. So, it goes without saying that, students drive the college, I think. So if students need something or if there's an interest in something, the university will do its best to provide resources for that.
Sure, because the community is the student and the student drives that, particularly in a public university.
Yes.
So what advice would you give to someone that wanted to go into culinary arts, wanted to go to culinary school, wanted to become a registered dietitian? What would you recommend to them?
I would definitely encourage them, but if someone wants to go into culinary arts in degree or food service industry, I would definitely encourage them to work first. So whether that's as a dishwasher, as a waiter, work in the food service industry, see if that's something that you like. And if you do enjoy it, you like being in the kitchen or you like learning about food, definitely go into a culinary arts degree. But definitely don't just go into it thinking that you're going to work at a 5-star restaurant right away. Get some experience and then see if that's a avenue that you're really interested in. And definitely as a registered dietitian, I completely encourage anyone to go to culinary school. That definitely is a good foundation as a dietitian. And it gives you an advantage in the nutrition industry.
Yeah. So it's really good.
And I think the biggest thing I was going to say as advice too is like you get to plan out your career path. You don't have to go where everyone's going. You can make your own career. You just have to, have that entrepreneurial spirit and look into the resources of the career path you want.
Yeah. Well, as we come to the end of our chat today, and before we wrap up, is there any last minute advice, guidance, something you want to leave with the listeners, something you want to share?
Right. So I think, again, I just want to encourage everyone to pursue what you want to do, what you're passionate about. It's very easy to have doubts and to not know what that next step is, but just take that first step, and I just want to encourage everyone to, pursue what they're passionate about. And, there's resources, there's information out there to help you take that next step. So don't feel discouraged. Definitely.
Sure. Life is short. You gotta get in the game.
Yes. And then, and I think, like you said, like if you're not sure what to do, always look for like mentors or people that could give you advice, or always reach out to people when you have questions. I think that was a big thing for me, is if I wanted to learn more about a topic, I would just Google, okay, who's the expert at this topic? Can I send them an email? Will they reply to my email? Like, it doesn't hurt to reach out to an organization and show your interest. That definitely can, help you network or take you to that next step in your career. So don't be afraid to reach out and look for resources in a career pathway that you're passionate about.
Awesome. Very good. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is just about all the time we have for this episode. And I want to first thank you, Rebeca, for coming on the show today and sharing your culinary school story with all of us. I really appreciate your time and your insight and your honesty and for talking with us all today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks again. I really enjoyed the chat, and bye-bye.
Bye.
And a big thanks and appreciation also goes out to all of you, the listeners. We hope you enjoy the show and this episode. You all are a big part of this show, so please let us know what you think. Your comments are always welcome, and they help us in making the best show possible. You can email them to culinaryschoolstories@gmail.com. That's culinaryschoolstories@gmail.com, or even leave us a voicemail at area code 207-835-1275. That's area code 207-835-1275. And if you like the show, we have a big ask of all of you, and that is to share the podcast with everyone you know, and to give us a positive rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Okay, until our next Culinary School Story, take care and be well. Bye-bye. Culinary School Stories is a proud member of the Food Media Network.